So I'm really eager to introduce two of our newest members to the committee. I remember exactly where I was when I got the call that I was following Chairman Archer on the Ways and Means Committee. Know exactly where I was sitting at my desk, and I had at the time, I think my 3-year-old son was here in Washington, and he was playing on the floor beside me, and I called my wife. I don't think I haven't been that excited for a long time. And so I'm envious of our newest members who get a chance to really already have stepped right into their key roles, come to this committee with remarkable experience, and are already making a difference. Let me introduce you to them. I'd like to introduce first Jodey Arrington from the great state of Texas. Jodey served our state and country in so many capacities, held leadership positions in President George W. Bush's White House, the FDIC, had a successful tenure at Texas Tech. Before joining our committee, Jodey was chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity for the Veterans Affairs Committee. He also served on the Ag Committee during the successful passage of last year's Farm Bill alongside our other Texan, Chairman Mike Conaway. You know, his dedication to cutting unnecessary government spending, bringing accountability to federal agencies, being eager to work across the aisle to get the job done are just some of the few reasons he was selected to serve on the Ways and Means Committee. So join with me in welcoming Jodey Arrington. And then following Jodey is Representative Ron Estes of Kansas. He's been an advocate for lower taxes, for balanced budget and free trade, lowering health care costs, and he's just a great addition to our committee. A lifelong Kansan who grew up on his family's farm. He knows firsthand the need for lower taxes and raising burdensome regulations off our job creators. Ron's the only former state treasurer in Congress. He served as county treasurer, as statewide treasurer back in Kansas. He's looking forward to focusing on retirement security, trade, and other issues as well. So join with me our other new member of the committee, the Honorable Ron Estes. So Jodey, I know you've got a schedule, you've got to catch with the leaders. So Jodey, why don't you kick us off with your remarks?
It's an honor to be here and to serve on Ways and Means. I know what some of you thinking. You're thinking, didn't we have enough Texans on Ways and Means? The answer is no, we did not. But it is a tremendous honor to serve with Chairman Brady, and he is my chairman, and I'm very proud to have served alongside of him. He was, we did a number of things that I'm very proud of in my first term in the 115th Congress. But no legislative initiative was more impactful and the process run better than the tax reform bill, and the results are tremendous. So it's good to be on the committee that has, I think, the greatest impact on the policies that affect everybody in this country, and that's why we do what we do. We want to make a difference. And if you want to make the biggest difference, you want to be on Ways and Means. And my district is 29 counties full of some God-fearing, freedom-loving rural people that want their country back. And we're mostly ag and energy. That's the base of our economy. I talked about being the food, fuel, and fiber capital of the United States, and it's true. And it's not just fossil energy, Tom, it's renewable energy. We produce more wind energy in District 19 in Texas than the entire state of California. Ag is very sensitive to trade, so trade's going to be a top issue for me, and I know many of my colleagues. We want to be a strong voice for our farmers and ranchers, and we need to get USMCA passed, and I'm proud to be on the WHIP team, and we'll work very hard to do that. That is life or death to production agriculture in the great state of Texas. We talked about China and hitting reset with the ambassador in our hearing yesterday. I think this president is doing the right thing. I might have done it a little differently. I might have been more targeted, Mr. Chairman, and more measured, but you know what? Maybe I would have gotten just targeted and measured results. I'm proud that he's being bold. We're hearing very positive things back from him in that process. And if we are able to hit reset, and if we're able to have a fair deal with China, then the future is much brighter for the next generation of farmers and ranchers. So we're pulling for them and we support them. I can speak for myself, but I think the committee supports what they're trying to do. So not only are we the ag and energy epicenter for this country, Lubbock is the regional healthcare hub for much of the Southwest. So when you think about Texas, we're more like eastern New Mexico, southwestern Oklahoma, southeastern Colorado. And between Dallas and Phoenix, no city offers more comprehensive services, healthcare services, than Lubbock. Texas Tech, where I served as Vice Chancellor for R&D and Technology Commercialization, has 2 medical schools with many campuses, but 2 independent medical schools, one in Lubbock, one in El Paso, and they're part of that healthcare ecosystem. I left Texas Tech after several years. By the way, I worked for Kent Hance, who had this seat, who beat George W. Bush for this seat. And so a lot of history with Texas 19. But I left Tech to start and run a telehealth company. So I believe in market forces of competition and empowered consumers, but I also believe in market forces and free market policies, because we need to unleash the entrepreneurial and innovative spirit in this country, because I think innovation and new technologies will go a long way to solve some of the big problems in healthcare and beyond. I think with that, so healthcare is obviously an issue that I'm going to be particularly interested and engaged in, and I would say that we have also the most rural community hospitals in my 29 county district, and there are 2,500 some odd rural hospitals, critical access hospitals, half of which are operating in the red. So we have to figure out a more sustainable model for rural hospitals, and I will be engaged on that front. And we were in the Farm Bill, Mr. Chairman. We offered an amendment that passed that supports them through rural development loans so they can have lower capital cost. And anything we can do to provide access to basic care for these rural communities is important investment for everybody, urban, suburban alike, because if you don't have access to basic care, you don't have sustainable small town USA, and you don't have food security and energy independence, because the next generation will not continue to feed you and clothe you and fuel this economy. So anyway, proud new member of Ways and Means. Don and many of you all helped me. I want to say thank you for that. My best way to thank you is to be a great member and to be prepared and to be strong. And I'm a sword and shovel guy. That's out of Nehemiah. I know you all know the scripture. This is not Sunday school, and I'm not going to ask you to
Don't
quote
look
it.
at me when you're saying that.
Chairman, why don't you just tell them about that sword and shovel? Come on now. Can I get a witness in here?
You preach it, brother.
Come on now. Pass that plate before I get out of here, please. Sword and shovel. It's the only way to lead a country as great as the United States. It's the only way to lead in rural America, because in rural America, and we're R2700, right? I mean, we're off the charts conservative, but we still understand and appreciate that leadership is working with people to solve problems and deliver results. If you don't work with people, you can't solve problems, and if you don't deliver results, what good are you to progress and to the next generation that's counting on us? So there are going to be times we're going to fight and protect and defend the good work of tax reform and other policies we put in place that you guys believe and know, and we're seeing the impact already in such a short time. And there'll be times we get the shovel out and we work to find common ground and solve problems together in a bipartisan way. So God
Jodey,
bless. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jodey. Great job. Thank you. Ron and I were talking last night that we saw a tweet yesterday. He said there's only two kinds of people in Washington: those who are watching the Cohen hearing and those who are watching the Lighthizer hearing. And then Rachel was watching both. Yeah, she told us. Ron, why don't you kick us off as well? And thanks again for your, just like Jodey, great first start on the committee.
Thank you. So Jodey did such a good job. I'll just say ditto. Thank you. No, it's great. We put all this effort into getting on Ways and Means. Of course, I'm here now. Mike Pompeo was my predecessor in this seat, and when he was tapped to go to the CIA back 2 years ago, then I jumped into the race, I'll come back a little bit to that story, but just a little bit more of an introduction of my background. I have an engineering undergraduate degree and a master's in business administration. So most of my career, 22 plus years, I spent doing process improvement and consulting work with mostly manufacturing and distribution companies, looking at how to put in computer systems and how to improve processes, just-in-time manufacturing concepts, some of those things that over the years were really beneficial. And I kind of took that approach and said, we need some of that activity within the government structure. And my wife and I had met at a Young Republican National Convention, and so politics are in both of our bloods. We'd helped others get elected, and I thought the next step was to run for office, so I ran for county treasurer. And the thing about county treasurers, as you know, they do the DMV operations in Kansas. So, obviously it was ripe territory to go out and look at how do we improve it. And, I don't think I've met anybody from any state that didn't have horror stories about that. So it's one of those areas that it was easy to jump into and look at from an administrative role. How do you fix that? And then the next logical step was into running for Kansas State Treasurer and focusing on some of the issues there in terms of managing a budget, managing the revenue, and working particularly with our pension system. When I ran in 2010, we were the second worst funded public employee pension system in the country. I always say thank goodness for Illinois. I don't know if anybody's from Illinois here, but sorry. So it was. Again, it was lots of areas that we could look at. How do we make some improvements? How do we make that process move forward? And so, that political dynamic had led to some improvements along the way, and so the states moved forward from that standpoint. But when this opportunity opened up, it was a logical thing for me to jump into just a much broader role in terms of area of responsibility. And then as I was running in a special election, Lynn Jenkins announced that she was going to retire and go have a life of her own. Go figure. She's gotten married and having, looking to having grandkids and things like that. So I don't know why she would want to do that as opposed to being here. Yeah, but what time's our vote scheduled? So we really put a focus on how do we leverage what my background was and working with the committee and some of the stuff that the committee does. I mean, such a broad scope in terms of what Ways and Means does. And from my district in Kansas, so 4th District of Kansas is kind of south central. It's the middle third of the state and the southern half. And Wichita is the center of it. We call Wichita the air capital of the world. I think the numbers roughly 2 out of every 3 airplane that's flying today was either manufactured completely in Wichita or a major piece of the components were made there. So Cessna's located there, Beechcraft, they're all under the Textron umbrella right now. Learjet, there's a big design component for Airbus, for wings. There's, Boeing was there for a long period of time, and they spun off their commercial operation. So every 737 fuselage is made in Wichita, Kansas. So they've made 10,000 of them over the years, and they put them on a train and ship them to Seattle for final assembly. So you can actually see trains with fuselages going down the track, and they. So it's an interesting dynamic from an aircraft and manufacturing center around that, and then there's a lot of other, farm equipment, case and some other manufacturing companies that actually are based out of there just because of the strength of the workforce. And then the district has 16 complete counties and part of a 17th. And so the ring around Wichita's a lot of rural, a lot of agriculture area. And so we have some of those same issues that Jodey talked about with our farmers and the issues that they address. And we've got a little bit of oil and gas in Kansas, not to the extent that Texas does, but that's a component of our economy as well. So when I look at the number one issue, I think for this session, it's trade, just from a standpoint of both from an agriculture standpoint, from our aviation industry, from manufacturing in general, and that's the big push that we need to make sure that we focus on. Most of our folks were a little apprehensive to open up NAFTA back when that was being talked about. I think at the end of the day, we're in a better place now. The USMCA is improvements over the 20-year-old NAFTA and some of those provisions that needed to be modernized. So, as Ambassador Lighthizer said earlier this week, it's a colossal problem if we don't get USMCA passed and moving forward from that standpoint and pushing on that. Trade with China is also an issue. I mean, our agriculture folks they're suffering, and they know they're suffering, but they're standing there saying this is the right thing to do. They're suffering a little bit in their pocketbook, but they're still supportive of the president in terms of that approach, because they know the way they look at world trade. They still want to have that opportunity to trade, and they know if they don't stand up to that, stand up to China now, it's not going to happen. And so I think it's important for us as a country to get both of those behind us. China's going to take a little bit longer than the USMCA, but there's a whole host of other things behind that. I mean, we need to come back and look at our larger Asia trade agreement, and we may not look exactly like TPP did, but we've got to do something from that standpoint. Obviously, there's other issues looking at dealing with the EU and the UK with Brexit coming along. So that's probably the biggest short term. When I look at what we're doing in the committee this year, just shifting gears a little bit, I think there's probably going to be some work that we can accomplish on drug pricing. Now the question is, we got to define what that problem is, because there's so many there, and the solutions for some of those aren't necessarily the same as solutions for others. So whether you're looking at a Medicare D versus a Medicare B problem, whether you're looking at orphan drugs, whether you're looking at price escalation in existing drugs that have escalated over. And so we need to make sure that we have, if we're going to narrow down, we'll make sure that our solution comes up to focus on that, and we recognize that there's, you can't squeeze the balloon in one place without it popping out in another. And so figuring out how do we make that work and set the right incentives in place to accomplish that. I'm also hopeful that we can do some retirement savings work this session. Probably not as much as we need to do, because solving some of the issues with Social Security is a longer term issue that we need to work on, but there's some other short term things that I think we can fix. And looking long term, how do we want to make sure that through our work career, Americans have the opportunity to prepare themselves for their retirement years, and making sure that we're set up through that. So I can talk a lot. I mean, as you guys know, elected officials, you give us a microphone and you're stuck for a long period of time. So maybe we just, I don't know, we're going to do some questions.
Let's join me in thanking Ron for his comments. So I know Jodey's got another conflict as well, but several references, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. So before we left last week, we began with Whip Scalise, the work to build support among Republicans for the trade agreement. So the normal game plan that will follow is to begin starting next week briefings with staff throughout the Republican conference, including the whip teams especially. Then we'll follow with briefings for the members themselves, begin to work sort of coalition by coalition, identify, lay the groundwork for what's in the agreement, because it happened just before the election. I don't think a lot of people are really digging into it, so let's do that now. Secondly, we'll identify the areas where there may be some concerns, fairly normal, Michelle, as you know, fairly normal in a trade process. Identify those, work with USTR so they can address those, work with the coalition that's been created to circle back on members. And our goal is, look, we don't yet know what approach Democrats will use. We think there's a positive opening here, but in the meantime, while we can't control them, we can control our support. So we still think at the end of the day, Republicans will have to provide the bulk of the votes for this agreement, so we're beginning to work right now. I think this is something that needs to be done this summer for a number of reasons, and we are pushing, I am pushing hard for not only the steel and aluminum tariffs to be lifted, but the quotas aren't imposed on this agreement. This agreement can stand on its own. It's strong enough, and we don't need a permanent quota going forward in any of these issues. So with that, let's open up for questions. Jim, is that okay?
That is
Don?
perfect. John Carlson, you did such a great job. You get the first question, but please let's recognize our wonderful guest.
The opposition party has already begun its new attack on the tax bill of last year by pointing to the fact that refunds are smaller, and it seems to be there's a little bit of a second look at that in the last few days. But can you address that issue in terms of the fact that of reduced withholding and the whole how it all plays together?
It is hard to believe we're having this discussion. And while the Democrats have been fact-checked mercilessly on this claim that lower refunds means you got a tax increase, we know that's not the case. We also know that refunds vary from year to year pretty dramatically. They vary within the tax season. Last year they started out very low, shot very high, ended up right in the middle, almost where expected. Wouldn't be surprised to see that happen again. So bottom line is, we are explaining to a lot of people in America that the refund only reflects what you overpaid the IRS in your paychecks last year. You can adjust those. Americans saw this in their paychecks starting in February. Nonetheless, I do think it's had an impact back home. I noticed last week as we were doing our town halls and our roundtables and all that, a lot of people were asking about that, assuming that they had gotten a tax increase. We know, more than 90% of Americans will see a tax cut. Another 5% will break even or so, and 5%, usually the higher earners in the higher tax states, will see the opposite. But yeah, it's been something we've had to deal with, and it is just the ongoing narrative. My frustration is that if the tax refunds had come in higher, the media would be explaining this to the rest of America. Nonetheless, that's our job to be able to lay out why, at the end of the day, lower refunds simply means you got your tax cut. For most families who live paycheck to paycheck, we designed this to be in your paycheck when you need it, not a year later. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've been talking through as well, and trying to convert the focus to talking about your tax liability and talking about some people want to get it in a refund, some people want to get it throughout the year, and kind of do that re-education, I guess, in terms of that process. And so we're working, actually trying to get an op-ed published to actually go through that explanation. We talked with some tax accountants in Wichita when we were back in the district last week, and actually had some examples there of the impact on people's taxes, and trying to make that focus on tax liability.
I don't expect the Democrats will have another hearing on the state of the middle class like they did, because the results are overwhelming. And whether it's the unemployment or job participation or consumer confidence or manufacturing job, you can't get around. There's no chink in the armor for what we've provided in terms of freer markets and the ensuing growth and opportunity. So I felt like that hearing, Mr. Chairman, fell flat for them, even though the deck was stacked on the witness stand.